The first time I noticed the keypad, it didn't even register as strange. I pulled into the driveway a little after 6 on a Tuesday, the sky over our cul-de-sac fading that soft, dusty pink that happens right before dark in early spring. Our street in Columbus was quiet the way it always was. Sprinklers ticking somewhere, a dog barking 2 houses down, someone's garage radio humming faintly with classic rock. I parked next to Ethan's truck and grabbed my tote bag from the passenger seat. I'd had a long shift at the dental office, and all I could think about was getting inside, taking off my shoes, and sitting on the couch for 10 minutes before starting dinner. When I walked past the garage door, I saw the new keypad mounted beside it. It was sleek, black, the kind with blue backlit numbers. For a second, I just stared at it. We'd never had a keypad before. Ethan had been talking about redoing the garage for weeks. New shelving, epoxy floors, better lighting, but a keypad felt like overkill. Still, he loved gadgets, so I shrugged it off and went inside. The house smelled like fresh cut wood and drywall dust. That's when I remembered the remodel. "Ethan," I called, dropping my bag on the kitchen counter. "Back here," his voice came from the garage. I stepped through the door and immediately saw how much had changed. Half the garage was cleared out. The old metal shelves were gone. There were new white cabinets along the wall and bright overhead LED panels that made everything look almost clinical. A workbench ran the length of the back wall, like something out of a YouTube DIY channel. Ethan stood in the middle of it, wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt dusted with sawdust, holding a drill. He looked proud, like a kid showing off a science project. "Well," he said, spreading his arms. I blinked. "Wow!" And I meant it. Our garage used to be a cluttered disaster. Old paint cans, Christmas decorations, random tools he never used. Now it looked organized, modern. "Okay," I laughed, stepping inside. "What happened to my husband and what did you do with him?" He grinned. "Been working on it during the day. Wanted to surprise you." "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "You're always complaining about the storage situation," and tilted my head, looking around. There were cabinets labeled with neat vinyl letters, garden tools, holiday stuff, cleaning supplies. He had even installed a little folding table near the wall. "You did all this yourself?" I asked. "Mostly." I walked over to the cabinets and opened one. Inside were plastic bins stacked perfectly. "Ethan," I said slowly, "this is actually amazing." He shrugged, trying to act casual, but I could see the satisfaction on his face. I figured if we're staying in this house long term, might as well make the space better. I leaned against the counter and watched him. We'd been married 8 years. Ethan was the kind of guy who started projects and rarely finished them. The fact that this looked complete was almost shocking. Then I noticed the door. At the back of the garage, where the old tool rack used to be, there was a new interior door, plain white, closed. I frowned. "Wait," I said. "What's that?" Ethan followed my gaze. "Oh, that." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Just a little workspace. You already have a workspace." He gestured at the bench. "I mean, like, a quiet spot. For projects." "Projects?" I repeated. "Yeah." I walked toward the door. It didn't have a normal knob. It had another keypad. I stopped. "That's new?" "Yeah," he said quickly. I turned back to him. "Why does your workspace need a keypad?" He laughed. "Because you always walk in when I'm working and start talking to me." I stared at him. "Wow, rude." "I'm kidding," he said, mostly. I stepped closer to the door. The keypad lit up when my hand passed near it. 4 digits. Simple. "Okay," I said, glancing back at him. "What's the code?" He hesitated. It was only for a second, but it was enough. I'll show you later," he said. That's when something small and quiet shifted inside my chest. Not panic, not suspicion exactly, just awareness. Like when you hear a noise in the middle of the night and suddenly you're wide awake. "Why later?" I asked. "I'm still setting stuff up in there." "So?" "It's messy." I crossed my arms. "You literally just showed me the construction zone that used to be our garage." He smiled, but it looked tight. "I promise you'll see it soon." I let it go, or at least I pretended to. "Fine," I said. "Mystery workshop." He relaxed a little. "Trust me, it's gonna be cool." We went inside after that. I made spaghetti. We watched half an episode of some crime show before I fell asleep on the couch. If you asked me that night whether something felt wrong in my marriage, I would have said no. Absolutely not. Ethan and I weren't perfect, but we were stable, comfortable. We had routines. Sunday morning coffee on the porch, Friday takeout from the taco place down the road. Arguments about dumb things like whose turn it was to do laundry. Nothing dramatic, nothing secretive. At least that's what I thought. The next morning, I left for work before Ethan. I kissed him goodbye while he was half asleep, hair messy, mumbling something about needing more coffee. By the time I got home that evening, his truck was gone, but the garage lights were on. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the garage door was closed. That wasn't unusual, but as I walked past the keypad, something caught my eye. Fingerprints, smudges on the numbers. Not just random ones, mostly on 3 digits. 1, 3, 7. I don't know why I noticed that. Maybe because I stare at details all day at the dental office. Maybe because something in my brain was already paying closer attention than usual. I reached out and pressed 1. The keypad beeped. Then I pressed 3. Another beep. Then 7. Before I could hit a 4th number, the garage door started lifting. I jumped back. "Well," I muttered. "Guess that works." The garage lights flickered brighter as the door rolled open. I stepped inside. The place smelled different now. Not just wood and dust. Something sweeter, like perfume. I frowned. Maybe cleaning supplies, I thought. I walked toward the back of the garage, toward the keypad door. Up close, it looked brand new. The kind of keypad lock you'd see on an Airbnb. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame. Tight seal, no gaps. Whoever installed it knew what they were doing. I looked at the keypad again. 4 digits. I tried 1370. The lock flashed red. "Okay," I said quietly. "Red. Red." I exhaled. "All right, detective," I whispered to myself. "Relax. It was probably something simple. Maybe Ethan was building something inside. Maybe he wanted it to be a surprise. Still, the smell was weird, and the keypad was weird, and the hesitation yesterday had been weird." I turned to leave the garage. That's when I heard it. A faint vibration, like a phone buzzing. But it wasn't coming from the garage. It was coming from inside the locked room. I froze. The vibration stopped, then started again. Short bursts. A phone notification. Someone's phone, inside the room. My stomach tightened. "Okay," I said out loud, trying to stay calm. Maybe Ethan left his phone. But Ethan never left his phone. He checked it constantly. Work emails, group chats, fantasy football. And besides, if it was his phone, why was it locked in there?
I stood in the quiet garage, staring at that door, feeling something slowly creeping up the back of my neck. Not proof, not even a clear suspicion, just that strange feeling when pieces don't quite line up. I forced myself to walk back inside the house. I made dinner, I folded laundry. I tried not to think about the door. Ethan came home around 8. He kissed me on the cheek and grabbed a beer from the fridge like everything was normal. We talked about our days, work, bills, his friend Mark's new truck. Then I asked, casually, "So when do I get to see the secret workshop?" He took a sip of beer. "Soon." I smiled. "How soon?" "Still working on it." "Ethan." "What?" "You installed a keypad." He laughed lightly. "Yeah? That's not a still working on it situation." He set the bottle down. "You're really curious about this, huh?" "Of course I am. It's in my house." He nodded slowly. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "The code changed today anyway." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," he said casually. "Had to reset it." "Why?" "Just messing with settings." I stared at him. "And now?" He shrugged. "I'll give you the code later." Something in his tone had shifted. Not angry, not defensive, just closed, like a door quietly locking. And that was the exact moment the little voice in my head stopped whispering and started speaking clearly. Something was wrong in my garage, and my husband didn't want me to see it. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because of a fight or anything dramatic. Ethan fell asleep almost immediately, one arm stretched across the bed like he always did, breathing slow and steady. If someone had walked into the room, they would have thought everything was perfectly normal, but my brain wouldn't turn off. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that keypad glowing in the dim garage light. I kept hearing the faint buzzing sound from behind the door. A phone. Someone's phone. And the smell. That sweet smell that definitely wasn't wood, dust, or cleaning spray. Perfume. At one point, I rolled onto my side and looked at Ethan in the dark. He looked exactly the same as he always did. Same messy brown hair, same slight crease between his eyebrows that showed up when he was stressed or concentrating. His wedding ring glinted faintly in the moonlight from the window. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of routines and shared grocery lists and inside jokes. And yet there was now a locked room in my own garage that I wasn't allowed to enter. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off. When I woke up, Ethan was already gone. His side of the bed was cold. I checked the clock, 7:12 a.m. Normally, he left around 8. I sat up slowly. "Okay," I muttered to myself. My chest felt tight again. I went downstairs, expecting to see a note or something on the counter. Nothing, just the coffee maker still warm. I poured myself a cup and stared out the kitchen window at the driveway. His truck was gone. The garage door was closed, and the keypad outside was still there like it had always been. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. People have hobbies, people have private spaces. But the problem wasn't the room. The problem was the way Ethan had changed the code, the way he said it like it was no big deal. I finished my coffee, got ready for work, and left. All day I tried to focus on patience and paperwork, but my brain kept drifting back to that door. At lunch, Melissa sat across from me in the break room eating a salad and scrolling through TikTok. "You look like someone ran over your dog," she said without looking up. "Thanks."
You didn't even argue with me, so I know something's wrong. I hesitated. Melissa had known me for 5 years. She'd heard every story about Ethan, good and bad. But saying this out loud felt ridiculous. My husband installed a locked room in our garage, I said. She looked up. What? Keypad lock. Why? Apparently it's his workspace. Melissa blinked. Okay. And he changed the code yesterday and won't tell me. She leaned back in her chair. That's weird, right? Like, weird. I rubbed my temples. I'm probably overthinking it. Melissa tilted her head. Does he normally hide stuff from you? No. Then yeah, she said. That's weird. Great. Exactly what I needed to hear. I got home before Ethan again that evening. The sun was still up, lighting the driveway in that late afternoon golden glow. I stood in front of the garage keypad longer than I meant to, just staring at it. Then I typed 1370 again. Red light. Okay, I whispered. New code. I stepped inside the garage. Same smell, same quiet. I walked straight to the locked door. This time I pressed my ear lightly against it. Nothing. No vibrations, no movement. Just silence. I pulled back and looked around the garage again. Everything else was so clean, so organized, which made the door feel even stranger, like a secret sitting in the middle of a showroom. I crouched down and looked at the gap beneath the door. Barely anything, but I could see light, soft, warm light. Not the bright white LEDs from the garage. Something softer, almost like lamp lighting. Okay, I whispered. Definitely a room. Then I noticed something else. A tiny scuff mark on the floor near the door. Not from tools, from shoes. High heels. I froze. It was faint, but unmistakable. A narrow heel dent in the epoxy coating. And Ethan didn't wear heels. My heart started beating faster. Relax, I said out loud, even though my voice sounded thin in the empty garage. Friends come over. But when? Ethan's friends never came during the day. And even if they did, why would someone in heels be walking in and out of a locked room? I stood up slowly, and that's when the garage door started opening. I jumped. The loud mechanical hum filled the space as sunlight spilled in. Ethan's truck rolled into the driveway. I backed away from the door quickly, pretending to examine one of the cabinets. The truck engine shut off. A moment later, Ethan walked in carrying a bag from the hardware store. Hey, he said. Hey. He glanced at me, then at the locked door behind me. Everything okay? Yeah, I said casually. Just looking at your cabinet labels. He set the bag down. You like them? Very Pinterest. He laughed. But his eyes flicked toward the door again. Just for a second. That same quiet awareness I'd felt yesterday crept back into my chest. He noticed where I'd been standing. Did you get off early? He asked. Little bit. He nodded slowly. Then he walked over to the keypad and casually typed in a code. I tried to watch his fingers without being obvious. 4 digits. But he moved too fast. The lock clicked. He opened the door just enough to slip inside. Give me a minute, he said. Then the door closed. Locked again. I stood there in the garage staring at it. My pulse was hammering now, because there was something else. When the door had opened for that split second, I saw a flash of color. Not tools, not wood. Fabric. Pink fabric. And a mirror. A full-length mirror leaning against the wall. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, my brain trying to process what I'd seen. Then the door opened again. Ethan stepped out quickly. Sorry, he said, just grabbing something. He walked past me toward the house. I followed him slowly. What exactly are you building in there? I asked. He didn't look back. Just stuff.
Stuff with mirrors? He stopped walking. For a second, his shoulders tensed. Then he turned around with a small smile. You're really curious about this. Well, yeah. It's not ready yet. I crossed my arms. You know that makes it sound worse, right? He laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. You'll see soon. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say. I saw a high heel mark on the floor. The air between us changed instantly. Ethan didn't respond right away. Probably from the previous owner, he said finally. We redid the entire floor. He shrugged. Then I don't know. I held his gaze, and for the first time in 8 years, Ethan looked away first. That night at dinner, he talked more than usual. Work stories, random news, a podcast episode about some startup founder. It felt like noise, like he was trying to fill every silence before I could ask another question. Around 9, he stood up suddenly. I'm going to run out to the garage for a bit. Of course you are, I said quietly. He paused. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. He studied me for a moment. Then he walked out. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then I got up and quietly stepped onto the back patio. From there you could see the side of the garage through the fence. The small window near the roofline glowed softly. Warm light.
not the bright LEDs. My chest tightened again. Then something moved behind the glass. A shadow. Not Ethan's shape. Smaller. Narrower. My stomach dropped. Because a second later I heard something faint through the night air. A laugh. A woman's laugh. Coming from inside the locked room in my garage. For a few seconds I just stood there on the patio, completely frozen. The night air was cool against my arms, but I barely felt it. My brain kept replaying the same thing over and over again. The laugh. Light. Female. Definitely not Ethan. I held my breath and leaned slightly closer to the fence, staring at that glowing window near the top of the garage wall. Another shadow moved across it. 2 shapes this time. One taller, one smaller. My stomach twisted so hard it actually hurt. I wanted to tell myself it was something innocent. A neighbor stopping by. Someone helping with the remodel. But nobody helping with construction wears heels and laughs behind locked doors. And nobody helping with construction hides inside a room my husband refuses to show me. My hands started shaking. I stepped back from the fence and went inside the house, trying to keep my breathing steady. Think. Just think. Running into the garage screaming wouldn't help anything. If something was really going on, Ethan would just deny it or shut down. I needed to see. Actually see. Not shadows and guesses. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter and sat at the table, staring at it for a minute. Then I opened the Amazon app. Small indoor camera. Next day delivery. I almost laughed at how insane that felt, but I ordered it anyway. The rest of the night was quiet. Ethan came back inside about 20 minutes later. His hair looked slightly damp at the temples, like he'd been sweating. "Everything okay?" he asked casually. "Fine," I said. We watched TV. We brushed our teeth. We went to bed. And if he noticed I barely spoke, he didn't say anything about it. The next morning I called in sick. The camera arrived around noon. I waited until the delivery truck drove away before opening the box in the kitchen. Tiny little thing. White. Magnetic base. Simple. I walked into the garage slowly, listening. Silence. The locked door sat there like it had nothing to hide. I climbed onto the small ladder Ethan kept near the wall and attached the chamber to the corner beam above the cabinets. From there it had a perfect view of the keypad door. I connected it to the app on my phone and tested the angle. Clear view. Crystal clear. Then I climbed down and went back inside, my heart pounding like I had just committed a crime. Maybe I had, but at that point I didn't care. Around 3 p.m, Ethan's truck pulled into the driveway. My pulse spiked. I opened the camera app and sat at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through emails. The garage door lifted. Ethan walked in carrying another hardware store bag. The camera picked up everything. He set the bag down, walked to the keypad, typed in the code. I leaned closer to the screen. But again, he moved too fast. The door opened, and that's when she walked out. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. She was younger, mid-20s maybe. Long blonde hair tied in a loose ponytail, black leggings, and a pale pink sweater. The exact color I'd seen for that split second yesterday. She stepped out of the room holding a water bottle and laughing about something. Ethan said something back that the camera couldn't pick up clearly. Then she did something that made my stomach flip over. She reached up and touched his arm. Casually. Familiar. Like it wasn't the first time. I stared at my phone screen, barely breathing. Ethan leaned against the doorframe while she talked. And then he smiled. Not the polite smile he gives strangers. The real one. The one I used to think was only for me. After a minute, she walked across the garage toward the side door that leads to the backyard. She slipped on a pair of white sneakers that had been sitting near the wall. Heels. Sneakers. That explained the mark. Ethan watched her go. Then he stepped back into the locked room and shut the door. My hands were ice cold. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I realized I was still staring at the camera feed. Still waiting. 30 minutes later, the door opened again. Ethan came out alone. He stretched his arms like someone finishing a workout. Then he grabbed a beer from the garage fridge and walked into the house. I quickly locked my phone and looked up just as he came through the kitchen door. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He opened the fridge and took a sip of the beer. "You feeling better?" "Fine." "He sleep a lot?" "Some." He nodded. Then he walked over and kissed the top of my head like everything in the world was normal. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not sadness, not even angry yet. Clarity. Because whatever was happening in that room, Ethan had lied to my face about it. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't even mention the garage. Instead, I watched. I paid attention to everything. The way he checked his phone more often. The way he started taking quick showers right after coming in from the garage. The way he smiled at his screen sometimes. 3 days passed. 3 days of camera footage. And she came back every single afternoon. Same time. Same pink sweater one day, a gray hoodie the next. Sometimes she stayed 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. Always leaving through the backyard. Always laughing. Always touching his arm or shoulder on the way out. By Friday night, I felt like I was watching a completely different version of my husband. One I'd never seen before. Saturday morning, he said he was going to Home Depot again. As soon as his truck pulled out of the driveway, I stood up.
My heart was beating so hard I'd hear it in my ears. "Okay," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Enough." I walked straight into the garage. The locked door stood there like it had been waiting for me. I stared at the keypad. 4 digits. I thought about the fingerprints I'd seen earlier that week.
137. But what was the fourth number? I took a breath. All right. Red, red, red. I exhaled slowly. Then I remembered something. Ethan's birthday, July 13, 713. What if I typed 7137? The lock clicked. My entire body went still. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The room inside wasn't a workshop, not even close. It was fully finished. Soft, warm lighting from 2 floor lamps, a full-length mirror against one wall, a small couch, shelves, and in the center of the room, a chrome pole bolted from floor to ceiling. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing because the walls were covered with framed photos of that girl, stretching, posing, smiling, wearing different workout clothes, dance outfits, some of them a lot more revealing. And then I saw the camera tripod facing the pole. My stomach dropped straight through the floor because suddenly everything made horrible, perfect sense. The heels, the locked door, the secrecy, the laughter. My husband hadn't been building a workshop. He'd built a private dance studio for another woman. And judging by the camera setup, he wasn't just watching. He was filming her. My hands started shaking again. Then I heard something behind me, the garage door beginning to open. Ethan was home, and I was standing inside the room he thought I'd never see. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of that room, staring at the pole like it might disappear if I blinked. But it didn't. The chrome surface reflected the warm light from the lamps, clean and polished, like it had been installed professionally. The mirror across from it made the space look twice as big, and through the reflection I could see every photo on the walls behind me. Her face was everywhere, laughing in one picture, stretching in another, leaning against the pole with one leg lifted in a pose that was definitely meant to look effortless. She was pretty. That part was undeniable. Young, flexible, confident in a way that came through even in still photos. My chest felt hollow, not because she was beautiful, but because my husband had built an entire hidden room dedicated to her. The garage door rumbled open behind me. I could hear Ethan's truck engine cut off. My brain screamed at me to move, but my feet wouldn't. I was still standing there when the door from the garage burst open. Ethan stepped inside holding a small cardboard box from Home Depot. And then he saw me. For a split second, he didn't react at all. He just stood there, staring at me in the center of the room. Then his eyes moved around the space. The mirror, the pole, the photos. His face drained of color. "How did you—" He stopped. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. Watched the exact moment his brain started trying to calculate damage control. "You guessed the code," he said finally. It was such a ridiculous question that I almost laughed. "Yeah," I said quietly. Silence filled the room, the kind that presses against your ears. Ethan set the box down slowly near the door. "I was going to show you." "When?" "Soon." I gestured around the room. "You built a secret dance studio in our garage. It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" He ran his hand through his hair. "She's a student." I blinked. "A student?" "Yes." "Ethan," I said carefully, "you're an insurance adjuster." "I know. So explain to me how you suddenly have a student dancing on a pole in our garage." He shifted his weight. "She's trying to build an online fitness channel." I stared at him. "And you're helping her with that?" "Yes." "With secret access codes?" He exhaled sharply. "You're twisting it." "Oh, I'm twisting it?" I pointed at the tripod. "You're filming her. For content. In a locked room? Because equipment is expensive and I didn't want people wandering in." "People like your wife?" He flinched slightly. "That's not fair." I felt something rise in my chest then. Not yelling, not rage, just a quiet kind of disbelief. "Her pictures are on the walls," I said. "That's branding." I looked at him like I was seeing a stranger. "Branding?" "Yes." "Ethan." "What?" "Her shoes are in here. She changes when she practices. She touches your arm every time she leaves." His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time since he walked in, he didn't have an immediate answer. I stepped closer to the wall and picked up one of the framed photos. It showed her leaning backward against the pole, hair cascading down, smiling straight at the camera. "Does she know you're married?" I asked. "Of course she does." "Does she know your wife didn't know about this room?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't hide it. You literally installed a keypad. That was for equipment security." I let out a slow breath.
Then I set the photo back down. I put a camera in the garage. The words landed like a dropped glass. Ethan's head snapped up. You what? I've been watching for 3 days. He stared at me, stunned. You spied on me? I held his gaze. You lied to me. She's just a friend. Friends don't need secret studios. He shook his head. You're making it something it isn't. I laughed then, actually laughed. It echoed strangely in the small room. You built her a stage. It's not a stage. You film her. For social media. You changed the lock code. That's normal. You never told me she existed. She's a client. You're not a trainer. His voice got louder. I'm helping her. With what exactly? He didn't answer. I could see frustration starting to boil in his eyes now. But underneath it was something else. Fear. Because he knew exactly how this looked. And there wasn't a version of the truth that made it better. Just different shades of bad. I walked slowly around the pole. My reflection in the mirror looked pale and tired. Does she come here when I'm at work? Yes. How long has this been happening? A few weeks. I raised an eyebrow. The photos say otherwise. He glanced at the wall. Okay, a couple months. There it was, the real timeline slipping out. And in those months, I said quietly, you never thought to mention it. You would have reacted exactly like this. So you chose lying instead. I chose avoiding a fight. I looked at him for a long time. 8 years of marriage standing between us like a wall. Have you slept with her? I asked. His eyes widened. No. You're sure about that answer? Yes. I studied his face. People think you need evidence to know when someone is lying. But when you've lived with someone for nearly a decade, you start to recognize the tiny cracks, the pauses, the shifts in breathing. Ethan held my gaze, steady, serious. And for the first time since walking into that room, I believed him. But that didn't fix anything, because the betrayal wasn't just about sex. It was about the months of secrecy, the hidden door, the lies told over dinner, the way he smiled at another woman in a room he built just for her. I stepped past him and walked toward the garage. Where are you going? He asked. Inside. To do what? I paused in the doorway. To think about why my husband thought turning our garage into a private filming studio for a 25-year-old dancer was a normal thing to do without telling his wife. She's not just a dancer. I looked back at him. Ethan? What? Listen to yourself. He didn't reply. I walked into the garage and closed the door behind me.
The bright white LED lights suddenly felt harsh after the warm glow of that room. I stood there for a minute staring at the keypad. All week, that door had felt like a mystery, a secret, something terrifying I wasn't ready to face. Now the mystery was gone, and what replaced it felt heavier, because secrets are sometimes easier than truth. Inside the house, Ethan was pacing the kitchen. I could hear his footsteps through the door. I walked in slowly. He stopped. So what now? He asked. It wasn't defensive. It sounded scared. And that was the strange part. For the first time since all of this started, I realized something. Ethan didn't look like a man who had been caught cheating. He looked like a man who had built something incredibly stupid and only now understood how badly he'd screwed up. I leaned against the counter. I don't know yet, I said. And that was the honest answer. Because standing there in my kitchen, hearing my husband breathe nervously across the room, I realized something unsettling. The worst betrayal wasn't the girl. It was the fact that somewhere along the way, Ethan had started living a completely separate life inside a locked room, and I hadn't even noticed the door being built. Whether our marriage survived that was something I hadn't figured out yet.